No doubt, you've heard some of the completely unexplainable stories about the moon. They're the strange structures that made front-page news of major news publications, but were then dismissed from all media and even photoshopped out of photos. There are the strange lunar wave videos of recent years, which seem to show the moon's image actually jumping as though it were a projected hologram. And you only need to search YouTube to see hundreds of videos of strange lights, flurries, and unidentified flying aircraft departing and landing on the surface of the moon. Yet, the US supposedly quit landing on the moon almost 50 years ago, in 1973. Was our every scientific question answered? Why are all these credible testimonies ignored or dismissed? Could there be more to that ball in the sky than meets the eye? If you research the moon, you might be surprised. Its reference in ancient history, its perfect geometrical symmetry, and even astronaut testimonies all seem to point to only one logical conclusion: that our moon is most likely a hollowed-out structure and an artificial satellite that was intentionally placed into Earth's orbit only a few 100,000 years ago. And that the advanced engineers accomplished this intending not only to influence the Earth's biology, but to oversee and control her inhabitants. The moon seems as natural as the landscape around us. But when you look at all the freakish facts, you'd see what one NASA researcher, Robin Brett, saw. He said, "It seems easier to explain the non-existence of the moon than it does to explain its existence." So then, why is that? For starters, no one can explain why the moon is older than the Earth, and older by millions of years. None of the collision with Earth theories make even a shred of sense. Secondly, if the moon were proportional to the planet it orbits, as other natural satellites are, it would only be 30 miles across. Instead, it's not double, not triple, but over 72 times larger, at 2,160 miles across. No other known natural satellites are a quarter of the size of the planet that they orbit. Then there are the craters. The varying diameters of the craters reveal impacts of varying size and force. They should have created a variety of depth, but instead, the craters all have the same depth. And when astronauts attempted to drill into the craters, they were barely able to penetrate the surface. They also discovered processed metals like brass, mica, and pure titanium, which are not naturally occurring elements. They are created and used for architectural design. Where it really gets strange, though, is when you examine the mathematical and geometrical relationship between the Sun, Moon, and Earth, which are so freakishly precise they defy all odds of randomness, with nothing like it in any other known planetary system. For example, the Sun is exactly 400 times bigger than the Moon, and it's almost 400 times the distance away. But that's just the beginning. There are the coincidences around the numbers 366, for the numbers 1092, and then the numbers 273. If you calculate the likelihood of this kind of precision in a random creation, the number would be so small it wouldn't fit on the screen. One of the strangest things about the moon is something that we don't even give a second thought, something called tidal lock. Frankly, the scientific definition makes it sound very natural. Tidal lock is simply that the moon's rotation exactly matches its orbit. In short, this means against all natural laws, the same side of the moon always faces the planet, and we're prevented from ever seeing the back half of our moon, also known as the dark side of the moon. Explore the universe. With very few exceptions, everything spins, including Earth, whose rotation should be throwing the moon into a furious counterspin. Instead, somehow, our moon is literally like an all-watching eye that never ceases surveillance of the planet to which it's bound. Another fact every astronomer knows: it's a 1 in a trillion chance that a planet's moon would appear exactly the same size as its sun during an eclipse. And, by the way, if you view a full eclipse from space, you'll see this. Look familiar? Then there's the fact that natural satellites circle their planets around the equator. So why does our moon circle Earth at a tendency of 5 degrees? The exact distance, elevation, elliptical course, and speed that enable it to transform life on Earth by creating tidal flow and seasons. All the benefit to life here for sure. So, older, bigger, and lighter in mass than it should be, according to the laws of physics, our moon shouldn't even be here. We know that without the moon, the Earth's orbital revolution would change. It's said that we'd have an unsteady gravitational pull, which would make the planet wobble. So if it's not a complete anomaly of random luck, how did the moon get here? Could it have been put there? To find out, we need to know the truth about our history. And not surprisingly, the ancients may have given us the answer. While you probably didn't get much education about this, a multitude of cultures the world over refer to what is called the time before the moon. The list of those who have written about this begins with many well-known ancient Greek writers and philosophers, including Aristotle and Plutarch. There's even reference to the time when there was no moon before the cataclysm, and certain inhabitants were known as Prosellenes, which means those that were before the moon. But this expression was used elsewhere. The Columbian legends say, in the earliest times when the moon was not yet in the heavens. In Africa, the Zulu tribe tells the legend that the moon is an egg with its yolk removed, brought here from far away by non-terrestrial dragons who placed it into orbit. Their legend says the Earth turned over when it was brought here, causing cataclysms and a great flood, nearly wiping out humanity. Could this legend coincide with our current understanding of history, when humanity's population bottlenecked, reducing all races to a single ancestor that geneticists call mitochondrial Eve, somewhere between 150 to 200,000 years ago? Could ancient Earth have experienced these cataclysms as a result of the arrival of this unnatural satellite? Would this explain why so many cultures, without any connection to each other, share the same story about our cosmic neighbor? The idea the moon was brought here seems like a stretch. We simply cannot fathom how. But let's imagine for a moment that the inconceivable is true, and that our seemingly natural moon was, in fact, brought here by a race with methods we've yet to comprehend. Why? Was it merely to create tides and seasons? Might it have anything to do with the humanoid race that was existing here? Could the answers be found in the other ancient historical writings of Earth history? Like the Sumerian tablets, which indicate the arrival of an extraterrestrial race who genetically manipulated humans to serve as their slaves here on Earth. So there's something strange about the mass of the moon. Understanding that it's 25% or 1/4 of the Earth's nearly 8,000-mile diameter, how is it possible that the mass of the moon is so much less than Earth, only 1.2% of Earth, when it should be the same ratio as the volume. In 1970, after years of research, two Russian scientists, Vazin and Sherbakov, published an article in Sputnik magazine titled, "Is the Moon Creation by Alien Intelligence?" Translated, it theorized that the moon is an artificial Earth satellite put into orbit around the Earth by some intelligent beings unknown to ourselves. Based on the sheer logic of its perfect size and orientation, they believed the moon was placed in the Earth's orbit ages ago. And they're not alone. In 2006, after decades of research, two Brits, Knight and Butler, also published their research in a book titled "Who Built the Moon?" They pointed out that the absolute perfectly proportional geometry and the sequencing of integers for every aspect of the moon was duplicated by no other body in the solar system. They also discussed the huge but ultra-light mass. In the end, they created a very persuasive conclusion, stating, if higher life only developed on Earth because the moon is exactly what it is and where it is, it becomes irrational to cling to the idea it's a natural object. They say the more likely possibility is the moon was brought here into our orbit and is most likely a hollowed-out planetoid. In November of 1969, the Apollo 12 crew sent their lunar module crashing down onto the moon, creating an artificial earthquake about 40 miles from their seismic devices. The ultra-sensitive equipment recorded the crash and found that the moon rang like a bell for almost 40 minutes, taking almost 8 minutes to reach its peak. It was so stunning that NASA decided to try it with an even heavier rocket in their next mission. So Apollo 13's module struck with the equivalent of 11 tons of TNT. Even though the seismic equipment was over 100 miles from the crash site, according to NASA, this time the moon rang like a gong, again reverberating for 3 full hours within the 2-kilometer radius of the landing. The outcome of these experiments are so unpredictable and shocking, most people simply refuse to entertain what they imply. When you consider the perfect geometry and placement of the moon, the shallow craters, the unique man-made elements, the locked orbit, the hollow reverberation, it becomes pretty obvious that there's a lot more to this story and the moon itself beneath the surface. On November 23rd of 1966, images taken by a manned moon orbiter showed no less than 6 tall structures on the moon. These images were published in the Washington Post and the LA Times, with at least one Boeing scientist claiming they were far too geometric to be natural. Upon study, Soviet space engineer Alexander Abramov noted that the center of the spires are arranged precisely the same way as the apices of the 3 Great Pyramids in Egypt. And they cast 4 perfect 90-degree angle shadows into an eroded pit area. At NASA, Dr. Farouk Elbaz, also claiming they could not be natural, revealed they were taller than any building on Earth. NASA, on the other hand, declined to investigate, saying it was a trick of light and shadow. Consequently, the subject was dropped from the media. But years later, several shots from Apollo 17 showed these same clear, right-angled structures. You may have noticed, photographs of the moon are so unclear, they look like they're from 1912 and are perfectly deceptive with regard to detail. In fact, Sometimes it seems that photos of the distant planet Mars are clearer than those of the Moon. At least until 1994, photographer Jose Escamilla colorized photos taken from a Moon orbiter 100 miles away. The effect revealed these structural anomalies not otherwise visible in black and white. So, if structures do exist on the Moon, who built them? And where are they now? Prior to the first Moon landing, Apollo 10 flew around the back of the Moon, and their transcripts reveal that they all heard what they called eerie outer space music, like nothing they'd ever heard before. Sounds which have since been compared to the electromagnetic radio-like sounds recorded by Cassini from inside Saturn's rings. NASA dismissed the noise as radio waves interacting with the magnetic field of the Moon. But the Moon doesn't have a magnetic field like planets do. So, to the question, what created this noise, we have a new question. Why lie about it? The first Apollo landing on the Moon is one of the most triumphant events of late human history. But after the structures were revealed, NASA had to have prepared the astronauts to potentially meet something or someone. During that trip, there were 2 minutes of video and radio silence when the cameras and recording equipment were said to have simultaneously failed. Of course, this equipment was the most highly advanced of the time and produced reliable recordings without a stitch for the rest of the mission. Years later, close friends and relatives revealed what both Armstrong and Aldrin said had actually happened during those minutes. On leaving the module, Armstrong deliberately switched his communication to the medic line and said, "There are other spacecraft here, sir, lined up on the other side of the crater. Those babies are huge, enormous. They're watching us." Without full disclosure of classified information, no one will ever know the real reason why the astronauts returned to Earth with such strange dispositions, without any indication in their cold expressions of the excitement that one would expect from the first men ever to touch the surface of the Moon. It became even more obvious that something was off when they were each interviewed separately. You can easily detect, even without being a body language expert, that something just isn't right.
It's a beginning of a new age.
Perhaps the most curious point of all is the cryptic speech that Armstrong gave 25 years after the landing.
There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers. There are places to go beyond belief.
Truth's protective layers? What or who is protecting us from the truth? So if the Moon is not solid mass, but a hollow artificial satellite, and there are structures there, certainly there must be evidence of extraterrestrial life somewhere. Of course, only astronauts would know for sure. And not surprisingly, you'll find that early on they were talking, but have become less inclined to reveal their knowledge as the years have passed. Here are a few among many who've revealed what they know. Scott Carpenter of the orbiter Mercury Atlas 7 said, "At no time when the astronauts were in space were they alone. There was a constant surveillance by UFOs." Buzz Aldrin, years after his legendary landing, for some reason became reclusive and said, "There's a monolith on the moon of Mars." When people find out about that, they'll say, "Who put that there?" The first Japanese American in space, Colonel Lieutenant Onizuka, went so far as to admit he witnessed small, strange-looking creatures, humanoid in shape. They did not look of earthly origin. And then, the sixth astronaut to walk on the moon, Edgar Mitchell, admitted, "Yes, there has been ET visitation and may continue to be. There's a lot of evidence that points to a clandestine group." What is the relationship of ET life to this clandestine group Mitchell named? What are they withholding from the rest of us? As we continue our exploration into the history and effects of our Earth's moon, we discover the possibility that there may be much more to our reality than we're led to believe, and that the moon may play an instrumental role in holding us in states where violence and aggression are normal, and the negativity which disempowers us empowers something else. We explored some of the strange facts about the moon, the rare geometric qualities, the clear structural ruins, the presence of titanium and other architectural compounds, how it was a very light mass indicating space within it, our history of time before the moon, and all the secrecy by those who've explored it. So it should come as no surprise to learn that more than one cosmologist has labeled it an artificial satellite. Is someone or something watching us? If the moon is not natural, why was it put there? Does it have anything to do with the concept of lunacy? The word lunacy traces back to the 16th century and describes eccentric behavior associated with a full moon. Yet, if you search lunar effect on Wikipedia, it reads, "Despite all of the beliefs, no valid scientific study has ever found a significant, extraordinary effect of the full moon on life on Earth." Interesting enough, there is a mountain of evidence proving the moon affects human beings. It was even known centuries ago that there is a rise in violent behavior during a full moon, perhaps giving credence to werewolf legends. One 4-year study ending in 1982 that was published on the National Institute of Health's website indicates a dramatic increase of crime during each full moon. What's not covered in the study is why this happens. So let's look at some of the obvious ways the moon affects us. For one, it directly impacts bodies of water, thus creating tidal flow on the Earth. If human beings are roughly 60% water, how could we be exempt from this law of physics? In fact, if half the female population experiences menses due to lunar cycles every month, that's almost 2 billion cases of humans being directly affected by the moon every day. In addition, the full moon changes the surface tension of water, and historically, surgeons were hesitant to operate during this time, since patients were likely to bleed more. Then, there's the effect of light itself during the night. For optimal physical and emotional balance, the brain needs both light and darkness. Light stimulates serotonin, so we feel joy and motivation, and darkness stimulates melatonin, so we sleep and dream. Melatonin also stimulates our pineal gland to produce DMT, which is well known to be the catalyst of spiritual awakening and the evolution of one's consciousness. During the full moon, illumination is 250 times greater than when there's a dark sky, thus inhibiting our production of melatonin. Naturally, this can create sleep deprivation and easily disrupt our emotional well-being. Add to this that for certain susceptible individuals, like those who are epileptic or bipolar, lack of sleep raises the likelihood of seizures and bipolar mania, both, which could have very serious consequences. While these examples are obvious, there are more ways the moon affects us. A little-known 2006 study, also published on NIH, explored the moon's effect on our neuroendocrine system, concluding that the moon probably serves within the lifelong clock of a brain to control development and aging in time. Could the moon be affecting our perception along with our physicality? If we refer to the information the conclusion that the moon is an unnatural satellite, and we consider the effects the moon has on the human race, it leaves us wondering if something is inhabiting the moon, and if so, for what reason? To find answers, let's start with ancient spiritual wisdom. In all ancient spiritual texts, there are references to evil reptilian-like entities, demons in Christianity, Nagas in Hinduism, or jinn in Islam. Even modern authors like Eckhart Tolle describe these low-frequency, unseen creatures, in his case, naming them the pain body. But these entities are probably best explained in the Gnostic Gospels, the sacred texts which were banned in 300 AD when other Gospels were selected and edited to create the Bible. The Gnostic Gospels were hidden in a cave in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, for almost 2,000 years, until their discovery in 1945. Roughly 1/5 of the texts discuss these dark, unseen entities, calling them the archons, interdimensional beings who are less interested in eternal damnation than they are in seducing humanity to keep us unaware of our own sacred nature and higher self. It's said that the archons completely disconnected from primary creator, the ultimate source of life energy and love. So they cultivate life energy from negative emotions created by humans, literally feeding off us like a vampire does a victim. According to the Gospel of Philip, their greatest tool isn't fear, but ignorance, which they call the mother of all evil. As long as humans remain ignorant of their own divinity, the archons quite literally exist as invisible parasites in our world, living without resistance, accessing and stealing life energy by hijacking human brains, very much the way humans were being used in the Matrix. As intelligent as human beings are, how is it possible we can behave so aggressively towards one another? In 1957, scientist Paul MacLean published his research on 3 parts of the human brain, naming the innermost part, our amygdala brainstem, the reptilian brain, because it's exactly structured like present-day reptiles. Our reptilian brain controls our body's vital functions and our response to fear, fight, flight, or freeze. Quite simply, this is the part of our brain responsible for aggression and violence. When activated, we are effectively in survival mode. As the famous cosmologist Carl Sagan noted, our reptilian brain is like the brain of a crocodile, the seat of aggression, territoriality, and social hierarchy. When it is threatened, even if only when our illusions about ourselves are challenged, some fly into murderous rage. Sagan added, the global balance of terror is a very delicate balance. It depends on the reptilian passions not being seriously aroused. Sagan frequently warned humanity about this enemy within each of us, and the politicians who appeal to it, inciting aggression, dominance, distrust, and war. So the more activated our reptilian brain becomes, the more aggressive or conforming our behavior becomes in order to survive. In either case, human beings can be more easily manipulated. So, according to this information, we don't even need demonic possession to be controlled. Simple traffic jams and overcrowded waiting rooms are efficient ways to dim the human spirit, ignite outrage, and feed archonic savagery. Like Morpheus said in The Matrix, it leads to a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. So if our primal brain is, in fact, being manipulated by multidimensional beings, naturally, we wonder why we can't see them. And here's where the moon comes in. If you've ever seen a hypnotist on stage, you may have witnessed him or her program a subject to be incapable of seeing someone standing immediately before them, even though everyone else in the room could see this person. This is true mind control, though the subject agreed to the condition. If this can effectively be done to one person, or even a few individuals, could it be done on a mass scale? According to many of the spiritual leaders urging us to wake up and ascend, yes, it can. To better understand, consider the cosmic components of life and the universe. Photons. Photons are the smallest or quantum amount of electromagnetic radiation. Our reality is a collective information field of photons. We can all see the same external things, but what we perceive differs. Our 5 senses convert the energetic information to electrical information in our brain. Our brain then decodes this electrical information according to our neurological programming, literally projecting a hologram based on our belief. The hypnotist can alter that picture by planting a block which stops the brain from decoding the energy field into electrical information, hence preventing it from entering the conscious mind. Remember the falling numbers in the Matrix? They symbolized this conversion. If we're living in a program, the hypnotist is no different than a computer programmer. So, when photons flow into our solar system from elsewhere in the galaxy, their paths are bent by magnetic fields of the sun and the earth. The moon, however, has no magnetic field. It receives and reflects the full spectrum of electromagnetic energy, even causing extreme temperatures, up to 200 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 400 at the moon's poles. Authors like David Icke believe that the moon works like an internet firewall to interrupt certain photons coming from the galaxy, purposely canceling higher frequencies and allowing only lower frequencies to our planet so that we remain in negative states, reactive in our reptilian brain. As the Gnostics say, victims of ignorance, of the mother of all evil. Here's his analogy. Electromagnetic energy from the sun transmits waveform information just like Wi-Fi broadcasts the internet. Our senses convert the information as our reality, the way a computer converts it onto a monitor screen. Icke believes the moon was placed to firewall the waveform information, deflecting frequencies that would contribute to expanding our awareness and perception, and instead transmitting frequencies which keep us concentrated in a small band of awareness, a low vibrational state of cognitive dissonance. Though Icke's claim may seem too fantastic, we only need to look at the ways reality is already hacked today. Take, for example, the Chinese government. It blocks vast amounts of the internet from its citizens. Simply look up Tiananmen Square from China, and you'll find no indication of the horrendous 1989 rebellion when soldiers killed hundreds of university student protesters. You'll only see photographs of happy people milling around the square. So, to the citizens of China, that bloodshed never happened, and consequentially, the government preserves their authoritarian control. There is a hack anytime the victors rewrite historical facts. An interesting side note: supposedly, in order to save energy costs, China is launching its own artificial moon that will brighten their night sky tenfold. We can't help but wonder what impact this will have on both the citizens, with their biological need for darkness, and on its nocturnal creatures. Could it be that the Chinese government is simply adding their own hack to set up surveillance and control in an already overly monitored social system? Are they borrowing this idea from elsewhere? Another author, internationally known trance channel, Barbara Marciniak, explains the moon's role from her perspective quite bluntly. She says, "The tales about the full moon and insanity, madness and heightened bleeding are all true. The moon is a very powerful electromagnetic computer. The moon's programs have been of great limitation towards human beings. The energy from the moon has been beaming electromagnetic frequencies onto the Earth for eons now to maintain two-stranded DNA. It's said that it should be 12-stranded. The moon is a satellite that was constructed. It was anchored outside Earth's atmosphere as a mediating and monitoring device, a supercomputer, or eye in the sky. The influence of the moon as a main satellite computer affects all the Earth in repetitive cycles that the moon creates, to which you respond. Earth must be owned by those who dwell there. However, it is not. You have outside gods, creator energies who prevent you, as a species, from having free reign with your Kundalini. It is the extraterrestrials that really operate it all. Your technology, though rapidly advancing, cannot begin to compare with the biotechnology, including genetic engineering, of sentient space travelers. You are newcomers to the game, and you miss a vital key. For your senses and the essence of your physical world structure reality in a particular way. You constantly translate data and, like interpreting a dream, condense the experience into physical boundaries, where you find you can explain less and less. There have been many battles over the moon. There is a plan to gradually insert different programs of influence on Earth when the moon becomes occupied by forces that would assist in your growth rather than limit you. Naturally, this is a challenging pill to swallow. If this moon matrix has any truth to it, there must be some additional evidence, right? And perhaps there is. In 2014, a vigilante astronomer and physicist, Crow, was filming the moon via telescope when he caught what appeared to be a clear, thermal energy-like wave, perfectly traversing the moon's surface. In the months that followed, he investigated this lunar wave, as he called it, and discovered, along with many others, that it occurred regularly, whenever the moon was near full. He also found that this wave would actually displace the location of the moon by millimeters on video, which would convert to many miles on the moon itself. Crow believes that this strange occurrence was evidence that the image of the moon was, at least during the wave, a projected hologram, and that it was likely concealing something on the moon's surface, at least during that minute or so of time. While the actual cause and purpose of the lunar wave is unclear, what Crow himself said is clear. The moon is not just a rock in space. There is a lot going on up there. Ignorance is bliss, and reality is way stranger than fiction. After all, the reality we perceive is only inside our mind. You may agree that our moon is definitely an enigma. As natural as it may seem when you see it, nothing about its existence makes sense. Add to this ancient legends, sacred texts, and its relationship to us, and we're left with more questions than when we started. It's not easy to swallow the idea that the moon may be keeping us in a low-frequency matrix, let alone that indetectable and malevolent interdimensional archons are keeping us ignorant and angry in order to have dinner. If we could expand our consciousness for a day, what would we see? Are there benevolent angels loving and guiding us? Might we also discover these dark, vampiric entities just beyond our ability to see? If you're wondering if the Matrix is real, consider what Morpheus says in the movie. What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. Well-known psychic and whistleblower Laura Eisenhower, who is the great-granddaughter of the 34th President of the United States, believes the Matrix is real, but affirms that as more and more people wake up, we are finally breaking free of it. She says, "The hidden control forces rely on us like a flashlight relies on a battery, because we are an inexhaustible flame that runs on spirit. We have been the fuel behind their power, but taking our power back now can't be stopped. It is now up to us, our creative intentions, and to our focus. We are never powerless to darkness. The Gnostics fought back with knowledge, wisdom, and detachment. The Bible offers timeless wisdom in Romans 12, when Paul says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." We have free will. It's up to us to choose wisely and to take full responsibility for our choices. In the 1950s, the physicist Enrico Fermi pointed out the strange contradiction about alien life. He said that given the vastness of the universe, there should be a high probability that other intelligent civilizations exist. But, he added, there is a total lack of evidence anywhere on Earth or in space. Considering all that's been shared, however, is his statement really true? Is there really no evidence, or just no evidence that you can safely discuss publicly? In fact, given all the evidence we've listed, can you step back far enough to see the forest through the trees? What is more threatening? Testimonies of people who've experienced unexplainable phenomenon by today's common knowledge? Or might the real threat be that if you dare to share your story, you could risk being ostracized from everything and everyone you know and love? Carl Sagan said something very wise about human nature. He recognized when new information challenges our beliefs, it threatens our sense of self and triggers our primal reptilian brain. Sagan long warned humanity about this, saying, "When our illusions about ourselves are challenged, some of us may tend to fly into murderous rages." So let's consider what the real threat is. The new information or our own response to it. We want to believe that if there was any validity to this artificial moon concept, certainly the scientific community would be exploring it, right? Of course, information as important as extraterrestrial life would never be withheld from public knowledge, or would it? According to NASA's Brookings Report, a 1960s discussion of space exploration, public disclosure of ET life would, quote, cause the collapse of society and must therefore remain clandestine. And there's that word again, clandestine, astronaut Edgar Mitchell's description for the hoarders of truth. The evidence is all around you. Dare to explore, dare to discuss, for until the day disclosure begins, it's safe to say Neil Armstrong's statement may have been slightly off. Rather than one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, it might have been one small step for man, one giant deception for mankind. Thank you for watching, and hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. We hope you'll subscribe, and if you'd like to be notified of future releases, just hit the bell button.